I didn't want to be seen the way that I saw my mom. I didn't know I was allowed to grieve a relationship that I didn't have. I really got a chance to sit with those feelings and grieve what I'll never have and get closer to acceptance. I've had to learn to be okay not being the perfect eldest daughter who abides by the rules because doing those things takes such a toll on me that it's not worth it.
Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of The Terri Cole Show. I am so glad that you are joining me. A couple of months ago, I did a reel about an Oprah show where Oprah was talking. She had a bunch of experts on there, and it was all about family estrangement. And a lot of it was about going no contact with family. And Nedra Tawwab, one of my pals, was on there, and Dr. Joshua Coleman was on there. And I created a reel that went viral about it. And because I felt like there was this whole conversation about going no contact seemed to be like the main vibe. And there's so much nuance where it's possible to go low contact. And so many of you have been having conflicts with your family. For a lot of people, just the state of the world and politics, probably the last decade, has, for a lot of people, this has been very divisive within their family of origin, especially if you already had a difficult relationship. It seemed like lines got drawn in the sand, and I had a lot of therapy clients who were going no contact, and my question was about going low contact and having healthy boundaries within those relationships, and was that possible to do that? So I've been talking about that, and in today's episode, I have a guest on that I'm interviewing and talking with them about their own experience of, basically she wrote a book, How to Stop Your Mother's Toxic Drama from Ruining Your Life, and her name is Ashley Oerman, and Ashley is a reporter, a writer, and an editor, and she's really a seeker, right? She was trying to figure out for herself, what could she do when she had this problematic relationship with her mother? Was it possible to have less contact? Was it necessary to go no contact? So part of what we're talking about in this interview is her process and all the research that she did, that she shares, with coming to a decision about what she was going to do in her own life. And what's interesting about Ashley is that she is deputy editor at Wonder Mind, which is a mental health centered media company founded by Selena Gomez and Mandy Teefey. So she edits and writes, deeply helpful, sort of easy to understand mental health content, which is how I met her, because she was interviewing me for a bunch of articles that she was writing. And so for her, it was like she's in this world of mental health, and she thought, I'm a journalist. Let me put my journalist cap on and sort of explore what I can do to change my situation, because I know that better mental health means being more empowered. So I hope that you will enjoy this interview with Ashley and go on this explorative journey with us about going no or low contact with the people in your life. I'm super excited to welcome my pal Ashley. And how do you say the last name? Tell me that before I go into it.
It's Oerman. The E is
Got
silent.
It. Okay. Got it. Welcome, Ashley Oerman, to the Terri Cole Show.
Hello.
Well, hello. All right. So this is so exciting. Is this I know that you're dropping. Well, right now we're in the pre-sale phase of your book. Is this your first book?
This is my first book. Books are hard. I don't recommend it.
Totally. I'd say 0 out of 10 is my 2 cents on the book front, but congratulations.
Thank you so much.
All right, so let's get into the why this book and the why now. But before we do, I feel like all of us do what we do for very specific reasons. Like there's really nothing random, like how you ended up doing whatever you're doing in life. So you writing this book is not random. How did you get to here in your life to decide to write this book called Mother, How to Stop Your Mother's Toxic Drama from Ruining Your Life, which is a very bold title?
Yes. Well, so I guess my origin story starts, as many do, in therapy. In my 20s, I got my dream job at Cosmopolitan, and I quickly realized that I had some pretty debilitating social anxiety going on. And I would go into my magazine pitch meetings where we present ideas for the next issue. And I couldn't read the pages in front of me. I couldn't breathe, which obviously is not great. Mental health talk was not a thing at the time, but
Right.
I knew something was up. So I started therapy. And my therapist and I sort of danced around this question for a long time. It was, why do you care so much if people think you're weird or awkward? Which was something I was concerned about with my coworkers. They're so smart and cool. I wanted to be seen as smart and cool as them. And I would say things like, who wants to be the Phoebe Buffet of their friend group? I don't. And finally, we got to the point where I discovered that I didn't want to be seen the way that I saw my mom. And that, was pretty, I felt like a cliche. I thought, here I am in therapy talking about my social anxiety, and turns out it all goes back to my mom. And I felt ashamed of that. And from there, we kept working together. And when I got to a place of acceptance, I was better able to I was better able to see what I wanted to do with this shitty situation. My therapist asked me, what comes next? What comes from this? And I wanted to use my skills as a journalist and an editor to really help other people via a book that I wish I had when I was in college. And so Mother was born.
Okay, so when you think about this, because this is a whole hot topic of conversation with people and parents, right? This is in the last 30 years, let's say, but really the last 5 to 10, I've really seen it on social media, where it used to be there were no choices as to how we would deal with our parents, right? It was like there was a socially sanctioned way of dealing with your parents, no matter who they were, no matter what they did, that if you didn't sort of toe that line, there would be social ramifications for that. People endlessly being like, you only get one mother, and when you have a toxic mother, you're like, thank Christ, but nobody can appreciate that. So how was it for you? And tell us a little bit about your relationship with your mother.
Yeah. So I think a story that sort of illustrates my relationship with my mom is when I was 8, I was hanging out outside with a girlfriend, and her mom came out and was like, "Hey, time to come in for dinner." We were chatting about whatever 8-year-olds chat about. And while we were doing that, my friend's mom put her arms over my friend and was sort of playing with her hair. And I was like, oh, that looks really nice. I would like some of that. And so I went home and I asked my mom, why don't you baby me anymore? And her response was, you want me to treat you like a baby? And I was like, no. And I tried to explain, what I meant. And she said, oh, you would like a smother mother. And that was sort of her phrase for an overly attentive mom, someone who's pretty nurturing. And my mom is not that way. And so that was when I learned it's not really okay to ask for what you want in this relationship, and instead kind of just shove those feelings down and try and make the best of what you got.
Yeah, it's amazing how we learn sort of young by just an innocent interaction, but you remember it. You're like, oh, okay, so this is not where I'm going to go for that.
Mhm.
So, why do you think there is so much stigma around having a dysfunctional relationship with mothers? Like, from your experience in talking about this and now writing about it, what are you
Mhm.
discovering?
Yeah. So I'm sure you can say much more about this than me, but I think one of the reasons is that society teaches us that our moms are supposed to love us more than anyone. They're supposed to be our biggest fans and our best friends. And so when they're not that, it feels like we are the problem. We did something wrong. And so that's one reason. I think for me, the shame and stigma also came from comparison. And one example, my freshman year of college, my sorority had Mom's Weekend, where it's basically an excuse to invite your moms up to school to hang out, go on a bar crawl, go to a Sunday brunch hosted by the sorority. And my friends' moms were booking hotel rooms, they were making plans to go shopping, they were ordering room service, and at the end of the weekend, they were really emotional, saying goodbye. And my mom showed up before the bar crawl, slept in my dorm room, and left early the next day before the brunch. And so I really just felt like I'm the only one whose mom who doesn't have the loving, feel good relationship with their mom that everyone else had. And yeah, that felt really shameful for me. And while working on this book, one thing that I found that was really interesting is there's some attachment research that suggests that most people in young adulthood and even beyond consider their moms their first or second closest relationship. And for single people, they often rank their mom as number one. And so, we're all out here functioning as if this relationship with our mom is super tight and close. I was doing that. I was calling my mom every week, inviting her to mom's weekend, doing all the things that a close mother daughter do. But your closest relationships are not always your healthiest, right? And so I think that cognitive dissonance between what you think it should be and what is can really make us feel ashamed. That's how I felt.
I think that there is also something about the optics where there's the part of you that continued to want to create that closer relationship than you actually had, or wanting her to be more into it than she actually was. So what sort of moved you in the direction? Like, what finally helped you start to heal this within yourself, and what did that look like in the real world with your mother?
So I think one of the biggest things that helped me move forward was recognizing that my feelings were real and they were coming from a real problem. I think that for a long time I doubted myself, and instead of addressing the issues, I made excuses for my mom. I catered to what she thought our relationship should be like. And that was a distraction from the real problem. And that kept me from feeling my feelings until they seeped into other parts of my life, like my job and my friendships and my self esteem. And the other part that was really helpful was grieving the relationship I wish I had with my mom. And this is something I heard you talk about on your Mother's Day episode a couple years ago, and it really resonated. I didn't know I was allowed to grieve a relationship that I didn't have. And once I discovered that that was possible, that was what I should be doing, I really got a chance to sit with those feelings and grieve what I'll never have and get closer to acceptance, which for me is like the end all be all of healing. Like once you can accept what is, then you're no longer taking action based on what you wish was, and
Right.
instead doing what you need to do based on your reality. And so those two things really helped empower me to set boundaries, which you know all about, and make choices that made sense for me, rather than putting my mom's needs ahead of me constantly.
So what is your relationship with her like now?
Yeah. So we are low contact, and that was definitely the hardest boundary I've ever had to set. And it took years to get to that point, and trial and error with many, many boundaries and seeing what works, and most importantly, what isn't working. And so we see each other at family gatherings, at holidays, and that's it. And I am, it bumps me out that this is what has made me feel better than I have for my entire life. That sucks, but
Right.
it really having this sort of distant relationship is what I need to do based on the relationship dynamic that she's created for us, and here we are.
So what would she want, or what does she say she wants, or does she
Mm.
understand what's going on? Like, where is she in all of this?
Yeah. So she does. I mean, okay, I can't say if she fully understands because I will never know how her brain works. And that's like one of the most frustrating parts of this kind of dynamic. I don't think that she can see that she has done anything wrong. I don't think the tools or the desire to change in order to better our relationship. And I think the desire is the biggest thing. Um, what I found with the reporting is that what it takes to be a good caregiver is the desire to do better, to make changes. And from the 30 plus years I have with my mom, she's not willing to do that,
Right.
unfortunately. And so I have become the bad guy in a lot of ways, and I've had to learn to be okay not being the perfect eldest daughter who abides by the rules and calls every week and all of that stuff, because doing those things like, takes such a toll on me that it's not worth it, unfortunately. So I've made peace with being the bad guy, and I know what the truth is for me, and that has been really helpful.
Yeah, there's been this conversation out there that Oprah just had a bunch of people on. So she had Dr. Joshua Coleman, who's a friend, and Nedra Tawwab, who's a friend, and the woman, what's her last name? Anyway, another woman who wrote a book about for adult children of emotionally immature parents, her Dr.
Lindsay
Lindsay
Gibson.
Gibson.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Anyway, I was listening to that, and I had done a reel about how this is now coming into this whole conversation. So, what is your 2 cents, given what you've just written a whole book on going low contact, and what led up to that and your experiences of it and how it affects you? Why do you think now it's out there in the zeitgeist the way that it is? Is it a generational thing, or what is your 2 cents as a journalist? I mean, because you're a writer as
Yeah,
well.
really good question. Based on my reporting, I think that, and what I've been told by mental health professionals who I interviewed for the book and researched, I think Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, I think this group of younger people is really interested in emotional connection and having deep emotional connections. And so when that is not happening in a relationship with any caregiver, it could be your mom or your dad or whoever, and you're not getting that, we're recognizing the problem perhaps more than previous generations. I think we're more willing to change the system and say, this really isn't working for me. Here are all these tools I have to better myself. Why can't my caregiver do this too? And so, with all of this knowledge, we want to improve the most important relationships in our lives.
So, what do you say about, because the flip side of this, if I were being the devil's advocate, is that you hear a lot of people saying, that this generation that is going no contact or low contact with family,
Hmm.
like, is selfish, self-absorbed. It's all about them. It's a lot of them don't have kids. They don't understand blah blah blah.
Mm.
And what is your thought about that? Because people will
Mhm.
read your book and be like, nobody beat you. So
Yeah.
so because your mother didn't hit you with a chair, what are you
Yes.
complaining about? Sort of. I mean, that's like a ridiculous extreme. But do you know what I mean, Ash? Like
I
there
absolutely
are,
know what you
yeah.
mean.
All right.
Yes,
So
I've
what are
had
your
these
thoughts?
thoughts myself. I've said that to myself for years. I said, is it really that bad? Maybe you're being dramatic. Suck it up and call your mom once a week. What's the big deal? But it wasn't until I was hanging up the phone and bursting into tears for no apparent reason that I was like, oh, this actually is not working for me. And so, to those people who say, don't buck the system, do what your mom wants, keep that relationship going, even if it hurts you, I would say why? Why would you want, your child or any child, even as an adult, to function in a relationship that way? We wouldn't put up with a partner who treated us in a way that wasn't respectful or kind or emotionally connected. So why should we do that with our
Yep.
parents? And I also should clarify that I do not encourage everyone to go low or no
Of
contact.
course.
Not at all. Like I said, it took me a year and a half of setting boundaries, collecting data on how my mom was responding to those, and ultimately deciding what was best for me. But really, there are
Yep.
so many reasons why going no contact or low contact wouldn't make sense for someone. And I do have a quiz in the book at the back that I hope people find really helpful and sort of weighing the pros and cons of like, is this right for me or not? And there's so
Yep.
many steps that can come before estrangement. So, what I would say,
What's interesting and what I like about the nuances, right? So you're telling a story of what you decided for you, but what you really did is you chose the healthy physical and emotional boundaries that you needed to do for you to feel like you have your own back, to feel like you are taking care of yourself. Because as a grown adult, I mean, you get to a point where your parents are no longer your caregivers, right? You are grown up and it's on us to figure out our lives. What I thought was interesting about the Oprah episode of her podcast about this is, you had different people talking about it, and you could see there was like, also it came off of the heels of the New York Times did a really pretty crappy article about, you know, going, it was basically the advice in the article, without naming any names, was basically saying, it's life is too short. Don't fight with your family. Just say it's fine and just be friends with everybody. Again, and I think that, that advice, right, not coming from anyone with a clinical license, is not super duper helpful because it ends up being damaging for people who actually are being victimized in their relationships and in their lives. And so I think that the way that I view your book and your experience and what you're sharing is through the lens of taking responsibility for our own boundaries. And the reel that I did after listening to that interview or that episode was basically saying nobody goes no contact. I've been a therapist for almost 30 years. Anyone even considering going no contact, I've never once in all of that time had someone being like, you know what, I didn't like the way she looked at me. I'm never talking to her again. Like this, the way that social media wants to make these things, these complex human interactions, seem very black and white. And that it's like, I just woke up on the wrong side of the bed and I just decided I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'm only going to see what family functions. That's not your process. That's not what you share in the book. And what I'm saying from a clinical point of view is that it is not what people do. So I don't know who these people who are not therapists are talking to about going no contact or whatever it is they're doing. But I think that, like you, most people labor mightily over making this kind of a decision. And it's scary as shit to make the decision and to set the boundaries and to decide that this is what you're doing for yourself. I was in a situation where someone, it was a family situation where somebody cut off contact with someone, but with no explanation, they just stopped responding to them, And the whole time, they ended up reconciling, figuring it out like 8 or 10 months later, but the whole time it was going on, and I kept being like, don't get involved. This is between the two of them. You need to just stay out of it. But it was so painful. And I kept thinking it would be so much better if they just said, I need space, or give me 6 months, or I'm taking 6 months, right? And then I just need to gather myself in this way. But it was the thing that drove me insane about that situation was the no contact. So the person who got ghosted just was showing up at their house, was leaving letters in their mailbox, was like, hello, what did I do? What is going on? And so anyway, I think that effective communication whether the other person is super open to it or not is important, that you at least say. So for you, how was it to have an open conversation about it? Or did you have an open conversation, or did you let your behavior lead?
Yeah. So I had many conversations with my mom about my feelings about our relationship. And in the beginning, um, it was probably in the first year of starting therapy, maybe even the first 6 months. The first conversation I had with my mom to address the way she had behaved visiting me, which is like a whole story for another time, um, was not directly saying, here's how you hurt my feelings and here's what I need you to do better. But I was expressing all the ways that she had hurt my feelings, and her response was sort of like, "Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you took it that way. I'm sorry you're so upset." And so I bring that story up because I think a lot of people show their caregiver, their parent, their mom, how they've been hurt by them, even if they aren't doing it in like a clinical perfect way. You're
Sure.
showing your parent where they're hurting you. And so hopefully your parent is picking up on those signals and correcting and repairing what has happened. But in my case, my mom did not pick up on those signals and make changes. So when I became more serious about setting boundaries years later, I did have sort of a come to Jesus talk with her where I made a list of, all the things that are hurtful in our relationship. I brought up specific issues, specific moments. I Yeah, I laid it all out. And I took notes during our conversation. I presented it to her sort of as like a state of the relationship speech, which I think can be really helpful for people who are bad at confrontation like me. And I have some more tips like that in the book on how to confront your mom about the issues in your relationship. And I took notes during that call on her response so I could reflect back in a more calm state on like how did she respond to the things that I said. And after giving her that speech, I waited for her to make changes and they never came. I think the closest we got is in one phone call. She said, "Is there anything else you'd like me to ask you about in your life?" Because I had said, "You don't ask me questions about myself." And she said, "Is there anything else you'd like me to ask you to be a good mom?" And I was like, "I see that you're trying, and it's painful for me that I have to tell you what I've already told you and that you can't understand how to interact with me." And that was sort of like, I think this is as good as it's going to get, and I've really presented everything. And then I slowly pulled back. So it was calling less often. Then I blocked her number for a period of time, unblocking it for birthdays and holidays. But the interaction we had outside of that distance, it was still painful. She was still making accusations, you never call me, you never answer your phone. It's not like, why don't you call me anymore? What can we do to fix this? It was just, you're doing something wrong. And so, yeah, I pulled back and she continued to tell my family that she didn't know what the problem was. She didn't had no idea what was going on, which I think is really common in these situations from what I can tell. And so I wrote her an email and I copy and pasted all the things I had read to her on the phone months earlier. And I said, like I heard you don't understand. I just want you to have this to reflect on in case you need it. Um, I said, please don't respond to this email. She responded to the email and said, I don't know what to do. You don't take my calls. I'll wait for you to reach out to me. And so that was kind of that. And I mean, that was what had to be done for
Yeah.
me, or the
So
best way I could.
how do you deal with people who don't like excuse me, people in your family, other people who don't understand why you've decided to change your relationship with your mom, including friends, including, people can be well-meaning when they're giving advice that you didn't ask for.
Yes.
So how do you deal with them?
Absolutely. I have a whole chapter on this in the book because this was such a tough thing to navigate. Specifically with the other close family relationships that I have. My mom's mom, my Nana, and I are very close.
Yep.
And so it was hard it was hard on that relationship. And I noticed that when I would talk about my mom with my Nana, that I didn't end those conversations feeling good. And so I use that data collection process to say, hey, maybe I need to set an internal boundary with myself that I just don't talk about my mom with my Nana, and that is
Right.
okay. And I think another thing that was really helpful is learning to be secure in myself and my own experiences, because sometimes I would talk to my friends about what was going on with my mom, and I really felt like I was the only one with this problem. I felt like I was weird. I felt like I was dirty. And once I could accept that, no, this relationship is unhealthy, it's not good, it makes me feel bad. It didn't matter how my friend responded. It didn't matter if they said the perfect thing back to me because I knew what I was experiencing, and
Right.
sharing it with a friend was just a way to connect with them, not a way to like seek external validation.
Right. Right. Okay, so tell everyone where they can find you and where they can get your brand new book.
Yes. So you can find my book on Simon and Schuster. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it at Target. You can also head to my website, ashleyOrman.com, where you can click that link and buy straight from there. Um, I think those are all the places. You can follow me on Instagram, where I will be talking about mom stuff all the time from now through Mother's Day.
Great.
If you're struggling with Mother's Day stuff, it is truly a really hard time. Send me a DM. I would love to hear from you and how you're dealing, and send you some love. So
Well, congratulations on your book. I'm so glad that you came to share some wisdom with us. Yeah, and I'm sending you all the good vibes.
thank you, Terry.
You're welcome.